Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidoo-doo-doo.
Minor Wisdom.
Hey guys, so this week on the Minor Wisdom podcast, I am now in the closet and with a studio that I have kind of created for myself in the closet of our office space in our house. So Minor Wisdom comes to you from In the Closet, which is apropos for a theater-related podcast. Hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody is staying clean. I hope everybody is quarantining and not going crazy. HISD is officially now quarantining because they just finished their spring break, and I know there were a couple that also did spring break, as you could see by all of the pictures of the people on the beaches in Florida. There were quite a few spring breakers, so hope everybody is actually paying attention to this stuff. And as they say, if it works, you won't even know because nothing will happen, and that means it works. And then you'll have the naysayers, why did we quarantine? It didn't spread. Well, that's the point. Anyway, enough about that stuff. We have been getting some stuff done around here. Our district has not really full-on told us yet what we're doing as far as online learning. There are a lot of resources online for us. There are a lot of resources online for you too through Facebook. There are a lot of resources online that different companies have opened up for you to, not only for you to learn, but also for your students to learn. I, for one, took advantage of the ETC Connect classes, and I got a certificate this week. It was super easy. If you've ever done the ETC or worked on any ETC board or any ETC syntax, easy for me to say, then these classes will come kind of easy to you, and it's a refresher. I also learned a lot of things about the boards that I've been using for over 20 years. So I've learned quite a few things because things change. Technology changes. I'm sure that's a news flash to you. The other thing I wanted to mention, so this is the niche podcast for Texas theater teachers. However, I'd love for it to branch out one day, but keeping it still in Texas because it hasn't branched out yet. But the idea of trying to consolidate all of our one-act plays into the month of May, and that's, I think, right now the plan, assuming we go back, and they have announced that May 4th is the day that you can start competing again as of now, but that might change as well, especially if we don't go back to school at all. But I think it's going to be difficult. I think one thing, I'm sure UIL has thought about this because they're very smart people, but I think one thing you guys need to maybe consider and get ahead of is the fact that the budget year for most districts ends in June, and they always tell us stop spending money after a certain date, which is usually sometime in April, maybe early May. So getting your funding for a bus, for travel, for all that stuff, that's going to be difficult for you. And I don't think any of the budget things are going to change. I don't think there's going to be a decree that the budget year gets extended a little longer, because then it affects next school year. So I think it's going to be difficult for that. I also think it's going to be difficult to get any sort of transportation approved through your district to be able to travel to these different sites. So as much as I would love to obviously see everybody be able to compete, I personally think it's going to be very, very difficult to have these competitions. Now, here's my solution, because I was always taught, don't ever come to a party with a problem unless you have a solution. And my solution would be, well, if you have done this the right way, and surprisingly, there are teachers that don't know you're supposed to apply for rights, even though it's part of the UIL sort of paperwork that you hand into your contest manager. But if you've done this the right way, you should have assumed you're going all the way to state, and you should have applied for, I don't know, depending if you had a district, if you should have applied for 6, maybe 7 shows that you're producing and paid for all that. So if you have done that, and we do go back to school, and we don't go back to UIL, do a weekend or two of your show, just like you would normally do. Or do just one weekend and run the show literally 7 times that week. It's a 40-minute show. Shouldn't be any more than that. Also, it takes away the stress of it being 40 minutes. Maybe you can tell the kids explore with taking some moments and beats and breaths and breathing off stage and all that kind of stuff so that you can, maybe do the show more towards the way that the playwright wanted you to do it. I think that could be, it could definitely satisfy the students in performing. There's no competitive element, but if you want a competitive element, then have some parents show up and tell you which one was the best of the 7 shows you produced or something. I don't know, or hand them a trophy or put something around their neck to make them feel better. But I think you can still get away with performing the show. Again, we were eliminated. Our district, we did a zone in a district the week before our spring break, which was the week before this past spring break. So we've been gone for a while, but so we have not been stressing about one-act play. We have our other stresses, but, try that. Speaking of stresses, so I've learned this week that teaching elementary school students, teaching my second grader, is actually not as difficult and not as I thought I wouldn't have as much fun. And I've actually learned to be very, very patient with her and come up with my own new ways of teaching her, especially math. We built a volcano. That's not hard. We talked about different countries. Let's just say she pronounced different African countries the politically incorrect way, but so be it. And she has now been taught so that she doesn't make that mistake around mixed company. But it has been actually quite a bit of fun to be able to teach my second grader. Now, my 3-year-old, who's having none of this school at home crap, hasn't been taught anything. She's regressing, so I'll just be honest about that. This week, I've got Kathy Powdrell, and now Kathy and I sat down at Friendswood High School, where she has been teaching for 2 decades. We literally just sat down in her theater, and if it sounds funny, it's because I recorded it on my phone, and it actually worked out really well, but it's going to sound a little different because I did that. And we recorded this, as we finished recording it, that's when we got the different notifications. That's my notification sound of all the schools closing. That's right when I got my phone off of record and put it back off of airplane mode. I got the message from our superintendent that we, in fact, had closed, and at that point it was only for 2 weeks, but that's when it all dropped. So the dynamic had changed. So I don't know what we say in this as far as do we think schools are closing, but if we do say that, just know that it was right before everything started shutting down. Guys, I hope, again, everybody's doing well. I'm still going to give you guys a Groaner Joke of the Week, and then the interview with Miss Kathy Powdrell. So I totally stole this from somebody that sent it to me online. How does a cat like their steak? Rare.
First of all, thank you so very much. And sorry it took me so long to get around it, but I was a little busy.
Yes.
But that's kind of the way I've lived my life. I've always been busy. When I was 12 years old, I grew up in an Italian-American family. And when I was 12 years old, Miss Nina Vance, hopefully you know who I'm talking about, was a client of my father's. She was a customer at our grocery store on the corner of Montrose and Beech Nut. And she came in, and she'd come in and buy her groceries. And one day she just said, "Mr. BC, Mr. Trombatory, you need to get that girl in theater." And the rest is kind of history. Here I am. I just turned 70 years old. I'm still sitting in a theater. And not that she launched it, but that's exactly what happened. I guess I was always performing.
Sure.
I grew up in Houston theater. Marietta Merrick, Cecil Pickett, the Real Alley, the real old alley, the beginning of Tuts, but most importantly, Houston Music Theater on South Main. And oh my gosh, what a wonderful adventure it was. Spending summers and every Saturday working there, as I was entered high school, watching Tommy Tune come to and from Lon Morris College and watching him tap dance in the lobby. And of course, then he was just a huge giant to a 4'10" little girl. So I was always just in awe and acting pretty heftily around town by the time I was 15. Immersed myself as a sophomore, junior, and senior in my high school theater program. I did one-act play every year and continued to work at Houston Music Theater at night, always kind of in at least one show, if not two. It's just how I grew up. Then I auditioned around the United States. I auditioned for the Prince Street Players, Mr. Prince, and he asked me to work on some things and come back. I did, and he suggested I audition for Juilliard, so I did, and I got accepted into the first acting class that Juilliard was having in this, I believe, year 69, 70-ish. But I'm the first generation American to ever go to college in my family. We're Sicilian. And I loved it. I loved the idea. I wanted to go. My parents were terrified, absolutely terrified. If there wasn't a place to stay, there was an international dorms there, but I might as well have been going back to the old country. They just couldn't. They weren't ready for it. So my father bought me an Oldsmobile Cutlass, and I stayed and went to U of H. And so I'm just so blessed at U of H to be there a year before Sydney came, Dr. Berger. And then Dr. Berger came, of course, and transformed all our lives. Yeah. And just as we were getting acclimated to Sydney, Cecil arrives. And of course, as a high school student, we had competed in one-act play against the great Cecil Pickett. So already, I knew him, but I had never been a student. Right. And so it would take me 7 years to get my undergrad, because I would work, and then I would come back and go to school. And then I would work and come back and say, oh, I'm going to be an English major. And then I would go back and work. And when I say work, I would go do theater. And then I would come back. And finally, at the age of 27, I went in to see Cecil. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Randy Quaid's making movies. And Randy Quaid and I auditioned for our first movie together. Side by side.
Yeah, 6 degrees of separation right there. Right?
Yeah. It is. No. Yeah. Randy and I went to our first audition together, and it was for the Last Picture Show. And Peter Bogdanovich said, you're just delightful. He was really, it was very uplifting. He said, but you're just too short for the camera. And he was absolutely right. Right. So, then I would go off and work and come back. That's the journey of an artist, isn't it? So I just remember landing in Cecil's office again. It's saying, Brent Mintz is working. I mean, but what am I doing? What am I doing? I just didn't care.
He dated my mom, by the way.
He
did? Dated my mom. Yeah, they went on a date.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, we did a lot of shows together. So I just grew up in that kind of Houston U of H brat pack. I mean, I was in the middle of it. So I was just like, what am I going to do? I really found the love of my life. What am I going to do? And he said, you need to teach. And I said, you want me to just be a teacher? And he leaned across with those Cecil Pickett eyes, and he lowered his glasses. And he said, well, and he could just pierce through your soul. Someone has to do it. Yeah. And someone has to do it right.
And here you are.
And here I am. And here I am. That's right. It's a benchmark moment in my life.
Yeah.
And that's the short story of me. That's how I ended up. So I come to education with zero technical experience, because we still talk about it. Our group of U of H friends who graduated back then, to go down in the Cullen building into the old shop. I mean, I just remember, my first attempt at building a step unit, they were just like saying, "Okay, it's okay, Kathy. You can just go call sound cues." In the sound booth, which was a glass booth, stage left in the old Cullen Auditorium. So, my happiest moments are in the attic theater in the old Cullen building, and absolutely on that stage. We started the Houston Shakespeare Festival.
Right.
I was in that group. We started the Houston Children's Theater Festival. We used to take showmobiles in the summer all across the inner city schools in Houston and do theater at 10 a.m. on Saturdays in city parks. It was grand. What a great...
Did they start at Miller Outdoor Theater?
Yes, they had started it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you and I have something in common, because I took 7 years as well to finish my bachelor's. Similar reasons, but
right.
That's
it's
kind
a
of
journey.
Yeah, same thing. Same at UH. I didn't have Pickett. I had Dr. Berger though. But
it's a name.
So you went on into teaching. What was your first school?
I started. It's great. I auditioned. I interviewed here.
It's kind of an audition.
Ironically, Friendswood High School is my first interview.
Okay.
But I wasn't from the University of Texas.
Right.
And so they didn't know if they really wanted to hire me. They weren't sure, because the musical here is really big.
Right.
And they just didn't think, even though I'd been in musicals with Tommy Tune, they just weren't sure. Dr. Kennedy just wasn't sure that I had the right stuff.
Right.
In the meantime, Lamarck, a really close friend of mine, was the high school theater director down in Lamarck, and Richard Hoag, and he said, "Come down, I need a junior high teacher, we'll be a great team." And he had been at U of H doing his master work, and so I'd already worked with him.
Sure.
It's a whole U of H thing.
Yeah.
What an amazing education.
Yeah.
What an amazing group of pre-professional teaching artists.
Yeah.
Because that is where you learn to work.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Sydney, was just amazing at building that program, reinventing it completely.
Right.
So I was blessed to be a part of that. So I went to work at Lamarck Junior High, and ended up going with Richard to state with JB and at the state meet back, and that was one of the first state UIL meet I'd ever seen. I got bitten by the bug.
Right.
So 2 years later, there's an opening here. Instead of me taking the job, my high school theater director, Benny Nipper, was at Ross S. Sterling in Houston. And when they called me to take the job, I said, "No, but I have someone who is 100 times better than me." And I called Miss Nipper, and she took the program over. And she would keep the program until 91, when I would come here full time.
Okay.
And in that time, in the 80s, I'm obviously married the love of my life, and worked and did theater, and both at junior high and high school and Lamarck, speech tournaments, all that stuff. Just came up through the ranks as a young teacher, and just fell in love with teaching, and had my family. And then Earl would travel us the world, and what I mean by that is that in his work in aerospace, we had the honor and privilege to live in England for about 6 months.
Right.
And so I took a leave of absence. I left and took care of my children. And then we came back, and then he was transferred to on a project in New York, Binghamton, New York, and working on Lear jets. And we went to New York. And we came home, and I landed a job at J. Frank Dobie, and enjoyed 3.5 wonderful years there. And at the end of that third year, and wonderful UIL experience, and we got to took that school to Region 3 times, the first time ever that school had ever had any success. Was really proud of that, and kind of energized that program. Then we transferred to Australia. And we had the wonderful opportunity to live in Australia for 2.5 years, and then just as I'm coming home, Benny says, I'm going to retire. I've bought this place in Dickinson called the Harbor Playhouse. I want you to come and see it. Now, remember, she's like my mother, right? I mean, she came into my life when I was 15. And I've told them that you are the person, you're it. And I've been here since 91, 92.
So, in a weird way, just making sure it's still going. Yeah, in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because you said this, and maybe you haven't caught on to this. Maybe I'm making you privy to this, but
what?
You said that Friendswood didn't want to hire you because you weren't a Longhorn, and then you went to Dobie.
I became a Longhorn. I did. I earned.
And then
Friendswood said, "Oh, you must. Yeah, you've got some orange on you." That's right. That it was just. I believe that they this musical program that I've inherited, right? It's 53 years old.
Right.
And for whatever reason, it wasn't the principal, and it wasn't the superintendent. It was Dr. Kennedy herself.
Right.
She had somebody else in mind.
When did this become Dr. Kennedy? When did this become the auditorium named after her?
We named it after her 6 years ago when she passed away.
Okay.
And when she passed away, and rightfully so.
Right. Yeah, good. And this auditorium that we're sitting in now is 50 years old, correct?
Yes.
It doesn't look 50.
Thank you. It is clean and it's warm.
It's very clean. It's welcoming. It's old school looking, but it doesn't look like it's got 50 years of life on it. But it's seen a lot.
It's the fan style of seating, which is modeled after the architect came in and had looked at the old alley. And if you know that and you sit around and you look at it, you totally see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see the vision.
Yeah.
So
even
I had
up top too.
Yes, exactly at top. So I'd worked at the alley thanks to Cecil Pickett. We were all about town working, and so when I got here, that wraparound sign. I mean, our proscenium is 62 feet wide. Yeah. Holy moly! Yeah. But it wraps around, so it's a cozy room.
Yeah.
But she's a tired old room. She's tired. She's just tired.
And so, speaking of that, there was just an article about it that Don Maines, who most local theater teachers know.
Yeah. Don't we love him? A shout out to Don.
Yes. Very giving in our profession.
He is.
But did a write-up pretty much about the age and deterioration, if you will, of the space, and the deterioration that is out of your control.
Beyond even the district's control. I want to tell you that
because it's well taken care of.
Absolutely. It is clean and it is well taken care of. But, in 91, a drill parent put out a cigarette. Do you remember do we remember that we could smoke in schools, It was coming in to do a dance. It was during UIL State. So I was at UIL State watching and with Mrs. Nipper, and literally a parent put a cigarette out at the door back there to just come in to do dance rehearsal for the mother-daughter dance.
Sure.
And before you know it, that it flashed up, and as you can see, acoustically we use wood, we use maple wood around, and the fire flashed forward. Of course, the smoke damage is in the brick and the structure, and even though it was remediated, acid stays. So now what we have are some crumbling bricks and walls, and the floor has been refinished many times. But termites love ash, and it just is what it is, and it's time, But I want to be the person. I want to work in a palace. Who wouldn't? But I've had those opportunities.
Yeah.
So this is my tired old room, and I want to be the person to turn the lights out.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So a weird transition.
No.
The way we met was going to the what's it called, the tour,
The FAM tour
the
for
FAM
the
the familiarization tour.
Yes, the FAM tour for the American High School Theater Festival.
Yes,
Yes.
to go to Edinburgh.
And it was love at first sight.
And yes,
Why,
we did
I
hit it
knew you
off.
were a cougar. We speak the same language. How did they do that to us?
It was almost the four of us just hung out because Ram was a part of
That's
the
right.
four of us with Amy too.
Just-
But
It was a special time in my life.
yes, it was very fun, very good time. A lot of bonding,
Absolutely.
if you will. Now I didn't end up going.
We know. I mean, look at what happened.
So for us, it was we had some broken promises from people that said that they would give us some money, some financial backing. And so when we accepted and when we sold it to our parents in our community and said, this is what we would like to do, here's some of the promises that we have from XYZ, they accepted that. They said, oh, then if we already have a percentage, let's say 25% of the funds, then sure, we could figure out a way to get the other 75. And we did a pretty darn good job getting a first chunk. But then people started getting tired, and everything that they said would happen happened as far as getting
Enthusiasm.
fatigued. Yeah,
Enthusiasm.
yes, and so our some of those promises fell through, and we couldn't make the money.
Right.
So
It's
we
a
fell
large
through.
commitment.
Yeah,
It's a very large commitment.
yeah,
And we had been asked 10 years ago or so to go. I think Peter Sargent was originally on that board, and he was always saying, you need to go, you need to go. So we were invited many times. I went to a FAM trip, and that came back, and literally in 2000, FISD, Dr. Kennedy and our superintendent said, whoa, you cannot take $50,000 out of this community. Because remember, Friendswood, we're unique.
yeah,
We have $1 million homes, true.
yeah.
But we also have apartments and trailer homes.
Yes.
Right? And so that's a lot of money, especially into that, to take out of a community. And it was probably a wise choice at that time. And if they say no, that's that made that we were unable to go.
Sure.
But it was kind of like a job unfinished, something that a dream and unfulfilled. So we made it work.
Yeah.
We absolutely made it work last year, and it was absolutely worth it. And
Yeah.
you know what made it worth it? Just seeing the light bulbs go off. Just seeing the sparks ignite,
Right.
just seeing the students exposed, just walking across the Thames and seeing the globe and getting to go back. I was very lucky enough to study there, and so there were some really benchmark moments in my soul and my theater soul to finally get an opportunity to direct in that country.
Do you feel that, so I walked in today and saw one act play rehearsal.
Yes.
Do you feel some of those kids have been changed?
Absolutely. Forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
And I believe that's kind of universal to all those kids. At least I would hope so.
Yeah.
I think you're going to agree with me. I think it always depends on the teacher. It always depends on the director.
Yeah. Follow the leader.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We set the tone for learning. We ignite the yearning to improve.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what actors have to do. That's what it's a yearning.
Yeah.
Of course, we need to know what our goals are and our obstacles and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But we have to have that yearning to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
If we start treating it like a job, so some people everybody's a different word for it.
Yeah.
I call it yearning. It's the need to do better.
Yeah.
The need to finish your master's degree. It's the need to sit in the room and smell the air.
Yeah.
Right? It's that yearning.
For me, it's passion or stage presence. I can't tell you how many times during this past rehearsal process with one act play, I said, you have stage presence and you fixed this problem on stage, you don't have stage presence, and you need to get to this level.
That's right.
So that you can also succeed.
Right. No, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I think it's Carolyn Boone who says
Sure.
you got to bring some cookies to the party.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
and that's what I'm saying. That this is that University of Houston education.
Yeah.
You just have some. They just get to it. They get to the through line very well. Okay, so I'm 70 years old and I'm still saying you got to bring some cookies to the party, man. You got to bring something on this deck.
Yeah.
I know I told you to stand there. That's good.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
You're there to make a scene. You're there
Yeah.
to tell the story.
I can't act for you.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
No.
My favorite analogy is a show is a piece of raw chicken, and all these actors are the spice. And you've gotta,
there you go.
You've got to be able to figure out how to.
Well,
spice
actually,
up
I just gave that note. I just talked to Grayson. I just talked to one of my lead actors. And I just said, it is going to be up to you, because I do believe this.
Mm-hmm.
A good director. It takes a long time to realize this. Actors are very fragile.
Sure.
So it's our job to plant the seeds and give them appointments,
Right.
and then help them fill in the blanks.
Right.
But they're like an orchid. If you breathe on them the wrong way, they're going to shut down
Right.
on you. So a good director knows when to, there's this thing about micromanaging.
Mm-hmm.
A good leader, a good facilitator, a good director, but a good teacher of youth knows when to let the actor drive till they can find their truth, and then take it and sculpt it and make it live.
Right.
Right? And that, I think young directors are really busy. I feel that sorry,
okay.
that's a school bell.
Sure. Still going here. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. I think young directors have that tendency to want to be in control of every moment. A good director knows when to get out of the way of the actors.
Yeah.
So I just, to get back to seasoning, I just said to one of my actors, we need to make the choice. Now it's time to, in this transition, it's a huge beat change. We can do it this way, or this way. Whatever sauce we put on this, it will be entirely up to you. Then you empower the young actor, obviously, but it's got to have some sauce. We gotta have some flavor. We can do it this way, which leads to this. Because one thing I'm fascinated about, I've never done it, but when I teach directing to young teachers and things, I love the whole idea. To me is maybe I grew up watching Johnny Carson too much, but I love it when they would have the domino people out.
Sure.
And they would line up all the dominoes on the soundstage floor, right? And these people would spend 2 days or a day or 13 hours setting up all those things. And it's that moment where pop that first domino, because that's what a play is.
Right.
Every moment leads to the next moment, which leads to the next moment, which leads, and it, I love it when they go up and over bridges, but that to me, it's just been the strongest metaphor for directing that I can't burn it out of
Right.
I can't pretend I didn't see it.
Right.
Because that's the epiphany. That is exactly it. And the second you can get your young people to buy into that, then it will fall into place, and eventually you won't have to lay down the last 10 dominoes.
Right.
They will lay themselves down.
Yeah.
And so with that said, it's not a superstition. It's not a superstition, but it may appear to be. I have a protocol. I'm going to use a big word. I have a protocol. I do not finish the play. The last 3 pages, maybe the last 4 pages. Sometimes if it's Shakespeare, the last scene, I don't finish it. We leave it naked and unaffected, because how do we know how it will end if we haven't really started living in it? I have an idea. We don't even touch it. We'll just stop. And it creates sort of a mystery and a secret organically for your actors and your techies. And they're sort of waiting for it. But then all of a sudden they discover, and generally, 9 times out of 10, they finish it themselves, right? It will always finish itself.
Where did you come up with that, or is that something you were taught, or?
That's just me. It's just something that kind of came. I think it's my love for Shakespeare. He wrote episodically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he didn't, when he picked up the quill, he didn't know how he didn't know how the play would end.
Sure.
Orange, he didn't know.
Right.
Right? An idea.
Yeah.
So that is just that's just something that I personally do.
Do you have a passion for Shakespeare before or after Dr. Berger?
Before.
Yeah.
But totally naive and totally just maybe in love with the romance.
Sure.
Because I remember I'm an English major as well.
Yeah.
I had the same English teacher.
It's a different study, though. It's a different way to study the
I had
text.
the same English teacher for 3 years.
Right.
Which is a great idea. Sophomore, junior, and senior. And
in high school?
In high school. She just nourished my love, my passion. She taught me how to read it. Mrs. Nipper wouldn't touch it. And so when I got to Sydney, I had the yearning.
Right.
So I was like a sponge.
Right.
I didn't need Sir Peter, but I hung on every word.
Sure.
Absolutely.
It's funny you also say that's another parallel between us. I had the same English teacher a couple years in high school as well, Chris Gibson. So who is I don't know if he's still acting locally, but was a Shakespeare guy.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And this is at HSPVA where obviously Bob Singleton is also beating you over the head with Shakespeare and literature and stuff. So
some of the best years of my life, I eventually became a Longhorn. There's been some really special people in my life, like Lynn Murray, of course, and then he had a vision for me that I didn't know. And my father had recently passed away, and it was the first summer after I lost my dad, which is, if you're a Sicilian female,
that's a big. Yeah.
It's not to diminish.
Yeah.
The loss of any father, but it's huge.
Yeah.
My father did not. He worked every day until he was 80 years old, and he spent the last 2 years here with me.
Right.
They would call him Mr. Trombatory, and they would. The lunch ladies knew him. He would come. We were still using benches and chairs and stools that my father made. Wow. Seriously, we became his. I never did a show, they weren't there. So I got a phone call from Lynn Murray, and he said, I need for you to come finish your graduate degree. And I guess because I'd been to state a few times, and I don't know, it doesn't matter, whatever reason. It was just thank God he called me, because he changed my life forever. And one reason he changed my life forever is because, I don't know if I can say this without crying, is because I got to sit in the classroom of Bob Singleton.
Yeah.
I got to relearn directing the Francis Hodge way with Bob Singleton, and even make everything. He just opened my eyes. He made me remember all the things that, absolutely one of the most amazing teachers and spirits of generosity and everything on the planet. And I'll always be in debt of my UT family.
Yeah.
And then the most wonderful thing, you get to work with Larry Wisdom and Sue and watch your babies grow up. We spent 6 or 7 wonderful summers together, all of us. It was theater boot camp. In fact, we took 50 kids. And then, David Stevens rolled in. He was the young one, and it was theater boot camp, and after Mr. Murray would leave at night, and I'm 40 years old, and we're running around the Be-Eyed and Pain, and we're having water gun wars, and oh my gosh, what a joy, what an absolute joy. Some of the best years of my life spent in summer theater camps with 50 high school kids. Just crazy. Just so grateful for Lynn, for Bob, Larry, Sue, and David. They're just my theater family.
Yeah. So you're very passionate.
Absolutely.
Life's
too short.
What you believe in, you're very passionate about. So I want to transition real fast.
Absolutely.
And then we can wrap up, because we've got to get away from Corona. But you are very active with ADA
Right.
rights, pretty much. I mean, for lack of better words,
That's
it's
right.
getting. And one spot that you and I also bonded on was my mother was wheelchair bound in a scooter, and we called her Rascal. But and so you and I fought similar fights at different points in our lives.
That's correct. You were far ahead of me.
Well, but I was also a teenager, and
Correct.
probably a little less effective because I wasn't, a seasoned vet, if you will. But I was just as loud. But you have been able to kind of like steer the way, pardon the pun, steer the way for having started with airplane access. I know that was one of the big things.
Still working on it.
Working on it.
They had a meeting 2 days ago.
Okay. But I know that's you've
yes.
been in front of. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've been in front of houses or House of Representatives of some sort. Or,
yes, 7 times.
Yeah, with the state or national level
National.
or both. Okay.
National.
So
the United States Congress.
because I know Ted Cruz was
Yes.
integral in that as well with
Yes.
you. So speak on that a little bit.
All right.
'Cause, and I know you could sit here for the next few days
I could.
talking about
10,
it. But
10 years ago, the unimaginable happened. My husband's heart took a beat
yeah.
through a clot. And the good news is that it went through the congenital hole in his heart that he didn't know he had. Went through that chamber. The bad news is it lodged and split into 2 places in the mid-pons of his brain,
Okay.
which left him locked in, which meant that the pons is the highest spinal cord injury that you possibly could have, truly, because it's command central.
Right.
So it split. It was bilateral. So everything, all his signals, instead of going up and down, up the left and down the right, or however you want to imagine it, one was high, one lesion was high from the blood clot, and the damage was low. So everything had to make an S for Earl. Earl opened his eyes and blinked. It's a long story, but long story short, Earl blinked 5 blinks and saved his life. And we began to communicate immediately, only, he couldn't look left or right. We didn't pick the stroke, it picked us. Mm-hmm. But Earl was an aerospace engineer with United States patents, and an incredible father, and more incredible husband. He loved my theater. He used to drive the one-act truck. He had never missed a one-act play, never missed a performance here. He would come in from work at 8 o'clock or so, and he would just walk through, and we'd just wander through. And anyway, long story short, Earl blinked that he wanted to be a miracle of God first and then a miracle of science second. Pretty early on, we realized the miracle of science wasn't going to just happen unless we fought for it.
Right.
So we were able to land at Tier. And we spent 7 months in and out that first year, and to get him stable and back to a great condition. And then the most amazing person came into our lives. I was standing in Kroger checking out about 14 months after Earl's stroke in 2010, and I got a phone call from United Spinal Houston, from amazing mentor Rafferty Laredo, and he said, "Hey, Kathy, it's Rafferty. I was just wondering, would you and Earl consider going to Washington to speak for the first annual Roll on Capitol Hill for disability rights for people with predominantly just spinal cord injuries and diseases?" Right. Just went, oh my goodness. I never thought, because we'd already been fighting battles. Right. We already learned that the first answer from an American insurance company is going to be no.
No, yeah.
You've always got to escalate. You always have to tell them to turn on the recorders, and then you have to tell them that you've turned on your tape recorders. You have to ask them if they're going to accept medical liability for their possible fatal decisions that affect your loved one's life. I was already learning all that, and I guess I was using my passion to fight those battles, to slay those dragons. And we said yes. We were too afraid to fly. We drove with a caregiver, and then our daughters met us there. And that whole world opened up to us.
Yeah.
And Earl, who had to type with his eyes, much like Stephen Hawking. Stephen's eyes didn't track as well, so they used muscles on his face, but Earl's eyes worked. Earl went back to NASA to work, but then decided, he was amazing. I mean, how does a locked-in person who can't move but can just blink go back to work at NASA? Not NASA, but Raytheon NASA. So anyway, we made that happen with TIER, and so we fought for Earl's recovery. And then we realized, my daughters, Kristen and Lindsay, and my sister Debbie, with Rafferty's help, we discovered that Earl, a voiceless man, probably had the loudest voice in the room.
Yeah.
And we found his mission. Earl lived just like I did. It's not an accident an actress ends up with an aerospace engineer. You go from mission to mission, from show to show, from casting to casting, right? We were perfect for each other. Yeah. A lot of people go, you're two worlds, cocktail parties. Yeah. How did you two meet? How did you end up, with an actress? And Earl would always so wisely say, we're both in simulation. I simulate in an air cargo bay, and Kathy simulates in the black box in a black world. I was like, it was love at first sight. So we found our voice and started making progress on complex rehabilitation services, like and Earl would type things like, you cannot train for the MBA. I run marathons. I can't train for a marathon in 25 days. I can't train for the NBA in 25 days. I can't train for the NFL. I can't train for the NHL. I can't train for any sport in 25 days. How do you expect me to recover from this stroke? He always said this stroke in 25 days a year of therapy. Right. And people would look at Earl, then they would look at me, and I would point to Toby. And we just kept reminding them. So we kind of, my daughters and my sister and Earl and I, we put the face in Washington. What we did was we put the face of an American family who sends astronauts to the space station, and who sends kids to state, and who worked hard, and who has an attorney general for a daughter. That American family, not the one that you want to pity, but that American family that against all odds is going to make something happen. But we put the face on that. If it can happen to us, it can happen to anyone. So we put the face of what disability looks like in America, and because there's stigmas there. There's stigma when a person is voiceless. There's a stigma when a person is at a, for heaven's sakes, a socio-economic level. You think, well, probably they didn't take care of themselves. Yeah. Do you know? That's that idea. Yeah. Or there's a stigma that, well, they just didn't do the right things. Right. But Earl ran marathons with astronauts. He played volleyball with astronauts.
Right. So then one final little question, because I can answer this too based on my experience. Yes. Were there elements to your life that you had been taking for granted that once this happened in 2010, you realized, oh, wow, okay, so this could be happening? For instance, one example for me is very basic, elementary, but I did not realize why there were striped spots next to a handicap spot.
Right, for the 8 foot.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until my mom had a ramp coming out of her van.
Absolutely. So, there were things about like curb cutouts. Yeah. So absolutely. Once you're in a chair and you're rolling in the universe, you discover you realize how painful it is to have a full body lift
Yeah.
out of a chair
Yeah.
that you didn't even, that's not even big enough to fit a standard second grader.
Right.
And you're going to put a 5'11" man
Yeah.
who weighs 175 pounds in that chair and roll him over the threshold to the cabin,
Right.
and then body lift him and put him into a chair.
Right.
And yes, I think that the walkers
Yeah.
in the world, and it's not, this isn't, I'm not trying, just you don't realize, because it's not in our normal vocabulary, right? No, I absolutely. And it's a great question, of course.
Yeah.
You discover things that you never think about all the time, where water fountains are.
Sure.
In the United States Capitol, only one wheelchair and barely a human attendant can fit into those century-old, those 200-year-old
Stalls or whatever.
room, and the bathrooms
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
The elevators, they're not accommodating.
Right.
So we got them to fix some things.
Right.
Because you can't go into a bathroom stall in Cath
Right.
in the United States Capitol because there wasn't enough room to move.
Right.
But they fixed it
Right.
because we rolled on there. And it's just, yes, absolutely. I think Jim Rambo was maybe one of the first people to be brave enough to ask, Kathy, how do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And, the show must go on, kind of the way we grew up and the way we learned at U of H. I hadn't stopped to think about how I was doing it.
You just do.
Right,
It's,
right. It's the
I've
new
been asked
normal,
that too.
right,
Yeah.
right. But I know, and there's just those frozen moments
Yeah.
in our lives, especially when you have a catastrophic event happen to someone you love. That was a frozen moment because he just stopped my world for a moment. To be that saying, to be still and know you are.
Yeah.
And I went, I really need to know how I'm doing it. And I think the most wonderful and enlightening is that I did it, and I could do it, and I persevered, and we got to the other side, and we made the world a better place because theater had already taught me what a 13 and a 14 and 15-hour day look like.
Mm-hmm.
Theater had already taught me that failure's not an option. Earl said failure's not an option. We learned the show must go on.
Minor wisdom.